Good afternoon. Welcome to the launch of the Agribusiness Deal Room at the AGRF Virtual Summit 2020. My name is Jennifer.
Hello.
I am the Head of Partnerships here at AGRA, and I'm very pleased to welcome all of you to a wonderful event that we will have with really excellent speakers. I would really like to extend a special welcome to His Excellency, the Minister of Agriculture for Ghana, Mr. Owusu Afriyie-Okoto, to our President, Dr. Agnes Kalibata, to our representatives from the Rwanda Development Board, the Deputy Administrator of USAID, Mrs. Bonnie Glick, all of our other partners, investors, and potential participants in the deal room. We will be having an exciting program today where we'll be talking not only about the challenges, but also about many opportunities that we can all unearth on behalf of our smallholder farmers and also SMEs. So without further ado, I would like to swiftly move to the rest of the program. I would like to invite the President of AGRA, Dr. Agnes Kalibata, Special Envoy for the UN Food Summit, to give us a special address on some of the challenges that our SMEs are facing in COVID times, but also some of the opportunities for agribusiness and really matchmaking and building platforms in a virtual world. Dr. Kalibata.
Thank you, Jennifer. So can you all hear me? You can hear me?
Yes.
Yes,
I can hear you.
Yes, thank you.
Very good. Thank you, Jennifer. Let me take this opportunity to welcome all the participants that are joining us here today. And particularly, let me welcome you, Honorable Minister, and thank you for the leadership you've provided during this time of COVID. You've been in a lot of meetings, you've given your views, you've supported different institutions, and we are really excited to have you on board, and we are very, very proud of the leadership that you're bringing on board. Let me also thank our partners. Thank you. Let me also thank our partners from USAID and from other institutions that are joining, and welcome you, and our partners from private sector, and welcome you all, and tell you we are extremely excited to have you on board. This agribusiness deal room that we are having right now, discussion, is basically a reflection of the environment we live in today and the world that we live in today. We have decided that nothing is going to stop us. We are not going to be stopped, whether it's by COVID or anything. Last year, we did launch a deal room, which was extremely exciting in Ghana, which had actually been launched the year before as well in Kigali, but we really saw a huge growth of that in Ghana. And we thought that we need to come back to this in a number of ways. One is just to come back and make sure that we are still around and we can associate ourselves with the people that are suffering because of COVID, especially the SMEs that we work with and all people in private sector, but also because this is the place to be. This is how agriculture gets done. 64% of the food that we eat away from the farm goes through the hands of SMEs and businesses. So this is the biggest opportunity that we have in the agricultural sector. These are the biggest partners we have. So we do recognize you, and we are very proud to be associated with you. I just wanted to go back to a few of the challenges as I was requested. The need to fund SMEs and ensure that SMEs are in this landscape the right way is huge. We do know that the agriculture sector needs over 100 billion, to be able to deliver the public and private goods that we require from it. But a huge chunk of that will come from private sector, and we do expect private sector really to provide a huge chunk of that. So we need to do a few things for private sector to be able to be in position to do that. So I will highlight for you some of the things we've been doing as an institution, as AGRA. I tell my team that if there was one thing we were meant to do is to provide a conducive environment for private sector to exist. And that conducive environment comes in several ways. It comes when the public sector is able to do its work and do it well. So our job is to ensure that the public sector does its work and does it well. So we do support a lot of work on the capacity of state, but we also do support a lot of work on policy reforms, recognizing fully well that no policy can last 10 years without needing a reform. And some of the best reforming policies, the institutions or countries that have the ability to reform policies very fast are able to respond to the challenges of the landscape pretty fast. So we do recognize that that is not necessarily a capability that is found in every country, and we do invest in reforming policies. Policy reforms are around systems functioning. Systems mean things that are very critical to the agriculture sector, the functioning of seed systems, the functioning of fertilizer systems, the functioning of financial systems and institutions around financial systems, the functioning of mechanization as a service to farmers and how it is regulated and made available, and all other service input systems, but also the output systems like markets. How well do they function? What are the policies that guide them? What are the regulatory instruments that make them function? And how well do they work? Those are some of the things we care about, because, you know, for a long time as an institution, we invested in access to technologies. And we really thought we had cracked that puzzle, because, you know, we thought that with good improved seeds, with good fertilizers, farmers should be able to produce. But then we realized that if the system is not working to get those things to farmers, then you're really wasting your time. So we do invest in that. But then we find that all that will need very good partnerships with private sector on the ground in countries, and really making sure that this private sector works is very critical for us. So last year, I mean the year before in Rwanda, we launched the deal room, which deal room then was also carried through in Ghana. And this, what the deal room did for us in Ghana was really amazing. Last year we did amazing piece. We were able to attract over 117 companies. I'm very proud to say that 35 of those companies were owned by women. And we pay a lot of attention to ensuring that women businesses do survive. We did attract an equivalent to those businesses that came were seeking an equivalent of $804 million. So if you're looking to invest, this was definitely the place to be. We did work with the governments, African governments, to put forward their own investment plans and their business plans, and 17 governments stepped forward with clear investment plans that were looking for $2.3 billion to be funded. We did build on the work of Grow Africa that already had signed agreements of over $200 million that were looking for funding. So the question of investment deals was not what was in shortage here. We were not in short supply of investment deals. And any investor that would have been looking definitely would have found a fertile ground here. So what we try to do, and what we will be trying to do going forward, is really to see how we continue to work with you, ensuring that this agribusiness deal room is a year-round event, that you know, a year-round, not even event is a one-time thing, is a year-round function that actually is able to allow people to connect from a business perspective, allow businesses that are seeking opportunities, seeking money with businesses that are actually looking to invest. So I'm really happy to say that we are extremely excited to be investing in this landscape. This is a landscape we want to grow. This is a landscape that has huge opportunities. This is a landscape that has suffered though from COVID, and we know it, and all of you know it. A lot of businesses, especially women-owned businesses, have suffered a lot during the COVID times. And this is an area where we really need to work very, very hard to make sure that we don't see any erosion of what we have already put there. Yes, businesses have already come to a halt to some extent, but can we prevent capital erosion? Can we ensure that they actually don't die, that they can actually, once they have the necessary working capital, they can come back to business? So those are some of the challenges we are facing, but those are also some of the opportunities that you all that are looking to invest would be looking for. So let me close there, really welcoming you all to the AGRF 2020 Agribusiness Deal Room. This will continue, this work will go on and will culminate into during the conference. We'll have this deal room again in the conference. But really the idea, as you'll be told by the team as we go into this work, is to ensure that the deal room is open year round. The deals can be made any day, that deals can be facilitated any day, and that if you're looking for a business opportunity, you can reach us any day, and we can do our best to support you, to support the governments that we work with, and the partners that are looking for opportunities in Africa. So I will end here and welcome you again, and really thank you for being part of the Agribusiness Deal Room for 2020. I know it's virtual, but let's make the most out of it, and let's really give the best to the people that are looking to do the most with the business environment in agriculture. Thank you again. Over to you. Kind of, you make me feel like I've been talking to myself.
No, thank you so much, Dr. Kalivaza, for this address. And definitely also for the encouragement of making the Agribusiness Deal Room even bigger and better than it was in 2019. I can assure you that our partners are committed, and we're really calling upon all of the investor communities, but also the SMEs and the enterprises out there and governments to contribute to this as well. Valentine, over to you. We cannot hear you, Valentine. Okay, we seem to have some sound challenges with my colleagues, Valentine. So I would like to take the opportunity to invite Annie Sprinkle, partner of International Development Advisory Services at KPMG, to share with us actually some of her insights into the African investment climate. Annie, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Jennifer. Minister for Food and Agriculture, Ghana, Honorable Owusu Afriyie-Akoto. Chief Executive Officer, Rwanda Development Bank, Mrs. Claire Akamanzi. Deputy Administrator of USAID, Bonnie Glick. President, Alliance for a Green Revolution in Africa, Dr. Agnes Kalibata. Ladies and gentlemen, all protocols observed. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Thank you. So I have been asked to speak on the investment climate for Africa, and I start by speaking about the numerous challenges that we face here. The biggest is access to finance, both for supply and demand side. Cost is the biggest constraint for many. This is particularly so given that many of them are SMEs. The result is lack of access to much needed financial services such as working capital, investment capital to grow business. And on the right of this slide, you'll see an interesting fact that less than 5% of total commercial credit goes to the agricultural sector, even though that sector accounts for 15 to 45% of GDP in many countries. Next slide, please. So we at KPMG have been working with AGRA on a survey covering agribusiness in Africa. And we've had some interesting conversations with diverse private sector participants. And in my speech today, I should like to add a few morsels of what we have actually found to date. And I will talk about other challenges other than access to finance, to which I shall return later. So the first area is infrastructure. Basic necessities for rural roads, power, water, required for thriving agro industries are not always available. Infrastructure is key to flourishing rural communities. More jobs in rural areas, which would result in less rural-urban migration. Affordable irrigation is also needed. This could transform Africa's immense natural assets to economic assets. Seamless logistics are a must at the heart of both local and international trade and can play a strong role in curbing food insecurity. Speaking of trade, impediments to food trade include political economy issues, corruption, high tariffs, and cumbersome regulations. It's interesting, in 2017, inter-African trade was only 17%, compared to 68% in Europe, 59% in Asia, and 50% in the Americas. The African Continental Free Trade Area Agreement, which was scheduled to commence in July 2020 and was expected to increase trade substantially, has been postponed due to COVID. Africa has the potential to feed not only itself, but also the world. However, it has a high food import bill. It's often easier to import than obtain food across borders on the continent. Another area discussed was regulation. In 2019, out of the top 10 reformers in the World Bank's Enabling the Business of Agriculture Index, 4 were from sub-Saharan Africa. However, on all indicators, the continent does lag behind the global average. Some of what we also heard is that regulations that affect business environment include things like time and cost of registration for new fertilizer products, quality of phytosanitary regulation, delays in obtaining documents to trade goods. And of course, we do have to acknowledge that COVID could result in regulatory reforms taking a back seat. We also have to recognize other impacts of COVID, although I know Dr. Kalibata has mentioned a few, but businesses are struggling to survive due to low demands, cash flow preservation, and access to working capital are top of mind. The operating environment has seen the collapse of export markets, reduction in trade within countries, increase in cost of inputs due to disruption in global supply chain, and the wait-and-see attitude adopted by certain farmers who are anxious about whether there will in fact be a market for produce. Next slide, please. But it cannot all be gloom. We have to have a way forward, and this we need to chart. We have to rethink the value chain. The traditional value chain can no longer hold. For Africa to realize a vision for a food secure and thriving agriculture sector, we propose that there has to be a new way of working. Partnerships, collaboration, an ecosystem approach with the customer and farmer at the center, with actors interconnected and collaborating to develop solutions that address issues that are holding back this sector. Next slide, please. We need innovative financing. There is a vast pipeline of opportunities for investors to explore. There's a variety of financial instruments, from grants, recourse loans, debt, equity, mezzanine, IPOs. Finance available from different sources, such as grants and challenge funds, venture capitalists, impact investors, MFIs and banks, private equity, to just name a few. It requires investors and businesses to get together, find solutions, and get assistance from government. Lastly, on the way forward, We should not let COVID stop us. One of the largest opportunities arising out of the pandemic is the growth of the buy local movement. We should seize the moment to strengthen local agri-systems and industry. We should have governments, development partners, and financiers support this growth. As mentioned, innovative finance is needed more than ever. Businesses, particularly SMEs, need some breathing space and liquidity facilities to survive the pandemic. Many finance facilities offer support only to portfolio companies. Help is needed for new players. The continental free trade agenda should continue, and private sector should be involved. And agricultural reforms must be given priorities. Next slide, please. Finally, I did mention that at KPMG, we work with a large number of private sector businesses, and we believe that business is development. So I feel it would be remiss if I did not mention that according to the World Bank, a higher score in their Enabling the Business of Agriculture Index is associated with better development outcomes, including a reduction of poverty and undernourishment. Apologies, I didn't move the last slide quickly enough, but I hope that you heard me. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much
for that, Anis. Okay. So thank you, Anis, and Honorable Minister, Dr. Kalibara. It's my pleasure to introduce Professor Reardon, who is well known and has a very long reputation for his frontier work in the supermarket revolution. Professor Reardon will be speaking to us this afternoon around leveraging the opportunities of the hidden middle, as has been rightly noted by earlier speakers, around developing an ecosystem, but also the pivotal role that SMEs play. Professor Reardon, welcome, and speak to us for the next couple of minutes.
Thank you very much. I don't see my PowerPoint yet. There it is, okay. Today, I have the privilege of speaking to you about investing by the hidden middle, firms in the processing sector, the logistics sector, and the wholesale sector, and investing in the hidden middle of food supply chains in Africa. And you'll see that I call it the hidden middle because very often in discussions with governments, with donors, with researchers, in conferences, people insist on the missing middle and that the services are missing. But in fact, what we found is that in the supply chains in Africa, the midstream, which is crucial to the whole supply chain of these actors, especially the small and medium enterprises, the SMEs, is extremely active and dynamic and is not missing, but has rather been hidden in the debate. And it's very important to see it as a set of hidden opportunities for investment. Next slide, please. I want to start with a few numbers concerning the importance of SMEs in the hidden middle in Africa. And the first fact that came out of our analysis of a lot of consumption data is that supply chains provide 80% of all food in Africa. 20, 30 years ago, I'm an old guy, so I remember these things. 20, 30 years ago, supply chains to, let's say, urban areas were considered to be a marginal topic, a specialized topic. Now, supply chains move 80% of all the food consumed in Africa. Urban areas themselves consume 60% of all national food consumption on average in Africa, and most of their food is purchased. Rural areas consume the other 40% of food. And we found that in those rural areas, 50% of the food in value terms is purchased. So 80% of food is purchased. And then within that market, SMEs have 85% of the market share, and large companies have 15%. So the big action in Africa are the SMEs. So if you look at the overall pie of food consumed by Africans, 68% goes via SMEs, 12% is going via large firms, and 20% is subsistence farming. Very different from 20, 30 years ago. Next slide, please. And within supply chains, even though there's very important emphasis and discussions on the farm as the purveyor of food, because 87% of Africans' food comes from farms in Africa. Only 13% is imported. Okay, that's in tonnage terms, FAO data. So of those supply chains, 40% is coming from the farm, but another 40% is coming from the hidden middle, from the midstream, and 20% from downstream actors, retailers. So the midstream of wholesale logistics and processing is as important as farmers are to African food security. And if you think of it another way, in volume terms, looking at FAO stat data, 850 million tons of food were consumed in 2017 in Africa. 80% of that was purchased. That means that the supply chain midstream handles 680 million tons of food per year. I think that's a major business already, right? It's not missing, it's handled 680 million tons. And so the midstream is hidden but not missing. And that's the point that we always are making now, is that it's a hidden middle, not a missing middle, and that it's hidden from many of the policy debates in Africa. The common image of this midstream and of the supply chain is that it's missing, it's stagnant, it's backward, it's stuck in the mud. But if you look at the data, that supply chain from rural to urban areas has grown 800% in the past 25 years. I would say that's a successful business. Next, please. And a key point is that, and a key message of the talk is that the hidden middle is already very dynamic in many places in Africa. And I'll give you an example from Nigeria, where we're doing a lot of work on fish, for example, and poultry. We often heard, Sawida and I, that fish supply chains are missing, that it's so sad, it's so stagnant, it's so poor, we need to start it, get it going. And then we went to the Abuja fish wholesale market, and we saw a river of fish trucks coming every hour, filled with sloshing fish from the southwest of Nigeria. So at the same conference, we heard fish supply chains are missing. Sawida and I are rubbing the mud off our boots from the Abuja fish wholesale market that was booming. We also heard warehouse and transport logistics are missing. But instead, for example, in our survey of 1,500 traders in Nigeria, we found a massive market for warehouse rental and truck third-party logistics services. 75% of all the maize in Nigeria is moving by these third-party logistics. So this is already bubbling and huge. Over and over again in our research, we've seen a big gap between the assumptions and images and the policy and donor debates and conferences, and on the other side, what we found in our field studies. Next, please. To me, I hear a lot about the hopes and dreams and focus on managed clusters, trying to get agri-parks going, agri-industrial parks, trying to get special economic zones going, etc. I think this is a very, very minor subject. It's a very marginal activity in developing regions. The real action is in the spontaneous clusters that are being formed by small and medium enterprises near and in many cities across Africa. And what we found is that this is spontaneous. It's not managed or subsidized by governments or NGOs. And these spontaneous clusters in their aggregate provide scale for entrepreneurs. Next, please. An example that really struck me is the boom that's occurred in the cluster of the teff supply chain going to Addis Ababa in Ethiopia. There's been a huge growth in urban demand for processed teff in Ethiopia in the past decade. And to serve the supply chain and build Addis economy, the government has invested in roads and grain wholesale markets throughout the region. What we found is that in 10 years, there was a 300% increase in trucks, in wholesalers, and in processor small and medium enterprises, a huge boom. In the process, transport costs actually decreased 50%, despite the government eliminating a 60% fuel subsidy. So this was intense investment by the trucking firms and the wholesale firms. There were no bank loans, no NGOs, no government subsidies, and yet a massive boom. I could give you 10 more stories if they gave me 100 minutes instead of 10 minutes. So what do we learn from the Ethiopia teff case and many others? The key is that when there's a confluence of two things, real action happens in the market in Africa already. The bones are present and the blood is present. The bones, as Anis was saying, is the enabling environment, the public infrastructure, the roads that go to cities, the wholesale markets, the water, the electrification. When those are in place, we found that the thing takes off. And then the blood are the investments by thousands and thousands of mainly small and medium enterprises in the private sector. Then we see market magic occurring. Next, please. So those are just a few points to show the dynamism of the hidden middle and the extreme importance of the hidden middle and the hidden opportunities of the hidden middle for you as investors. So what are strategies for supporting investment? First is that the SMEs, to really take on board the idea that SMEs in the hidden middle, in their aggregate, are already by far the #1 investors in African food supply chains. They already handle 680 million tons of food per year to feed Africa. Their airplane has already taken off, but it's flying at 10,000 feet. It could be flying at 35,000 feet. If we can help address their constraints and leverage their investments. Next, please. Next slide, please. Yes. This first step, and I think it's so important, especially because the blinders are on by everybody saying this thing is missing, it's stuck in the mud, it's broken, is I say to governments and even to private sector, don't fly blind. Governments, I think, are flying blind because of a widespread lack of information on the midstream of the supply chain in their countries. To guide interventions and help private investors, governments and donors need to continuously invest in field research post-farm gate. What are the emerging spontaneous clusters? Find them. Often they're ignored, under the radar. How do the firms in those clusters really operate? What specific challenges do they face? And then the nitty-gritty, what specific kinds of investments and finance do they need? Next, please. Step number 2. This is something that Agnes said, that Ani said. Governments need to address infrastructure and regulation problems. They need to invest in that midstream's ecosystems. Roads, water, electricity, wholesale markets are so crucial. We found that where those came together, magic occurred. The thing took off. And the example of the Abuja fish wholesale market really struck us because there was a massive number of players coming into the market, but the bones were broken. The wholesale market was 20 years old and absolutely falling apart. We asked the people in the market, what do you really need? They said, fix this market. It's stuck in the mud, but we're not. And the same with roads to fish zones and front fishes in northern Nigeria. Thousands of wholesalers and firms are working, but the roads are broken. So it's important to invest in the enabling environment physically, but also invest in the enabling policy environment. Don't hold back your SME food system heroes. And the third step for private investors, and I'm talking not just to the angels, but also to the mortals, engage with the nitty-gritty of the midstream ecosystem. Boots on the ground to identify emerging spontaneous clusters, identify investment needs that differ a lot by cluster, and partner with SME associations or individual SMEs. Next, please. I think that there are many opportunities, but hidden. Upgrade cold storages, provide loans to truckers for bigger trucks, to warehouses to do food safety upgrades, build big bridging contracts with buyers from the cluster and help the clusters to upgrade to meet the buyer's requirements. Provide business development services to these spontaneous clusters. And all of that for the inclusive rapid growth of the hidden middle of the food supply chain in Africa. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Professor Reardon. I think that's a lot of food for thought in terms of how we can start looking at both emerging and existing opportunities amongst the SMEs. It's really my pleasure to now introduce you and invite the Honorable Owusu Afriyie-Okoto, the Minister of Agriculture from Ghana, who's really a true champion of food security initiatives, not just in his own country in terms of Planting for Food and Jobs program and his commitment to provide farmers with seeds, but also the championship that he showcased last year when the AGRF and the Agribusiness Deal Room were visiting Accra. So, Honorable Minister, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm glad to receive this invitation to address this very august forum. Your Excellencies, AGRF board members, AGRF president, colleague ministers, development partners, private sector representatives. Let me have my opening remark by saying a word of congratulations to the government of Rwanda for hosting this year's AGRF and the launch of this agribusiness deal room as a side event for today. I've been asked to speak for only 5 minutes, but I wish I could have a little bit more time in the sense that the opportunities, the investment opportunities for SMEs in Ghana are so enormous, given the fact that in a very short period of 3.5 years, we've been able to turn this country into a surplus, agricultural surplus country. And the problems we are facing today is not one of shortage, but managing a surplus. And managing the surplus requires massive investments, most of which should go to the SMEs. In Ghana, we're talking about the grains, rice, and maize. We're talking about the tree crops development, where we are targeting to raise 7 cash crops to the level where they could be earning this country something like $15 billion within the next 8 years, and for which a new authority has been established to pursue this target. Then we have the vegetable and food processes. And these three, we are very clear on the agents of for investment, the SMEs. We in Ghana here are not flying in the blind at all. We know where these SMEs are. The only problem is that for so many years, there's been neglect in financing these SMEs. And I've been instrumental in getting the governor of the bank, the Minister of Finance, the three of us to come together to see how best we can support these SMEs. I'll give you a sense in the case of rice. Trying to be self-sufficient in rice in the next years, which means that a current level of sufficiency we have for about 6,000 metric tons produce compared to the state average of 1 million. Confident that we'll be able to come to 1.2 million because of where we came from. 3.5, 4 years ago, Ghana was producing hardly less than 300,000 metric tons, and we've been able to double it in a very short period, and we intend to accelerate. But in all this, the capacity for processing, milling capacity in Ghana is only about 400,000 metric tons. So if we want to get to 1 million metric tons, there's a huge gap of investment of nearly 600,000 metric tons.
Excuse me, Honorable Minister. I think we have lost some sound there. So
In Ghana. So we need to be able to.
Please continue. We just lost
Hello?
you for half a second. But please continue. You're audible now. So please continue.
Okay, so thank you very much. So it means that there's a challenge there. There's a gap of millers or SMEs trying to more than double, in other words, to treble their capacity to start with. But then this 400,000 metric tons of capacity for rice milling is not even realized because they can only do 40% of that capacity because of lack of working capital. They've used their own funds to build the mills and so on, and they don't have enough money to buy the inputs, that's the rice from the farmers to mill. So this new scheme that we put our heads together is to come up with a system where we'll be able to support the small mills, millers, with the millers with working capital so they can buy from the farmers and secure the farmers' market with that surplus. And I can cite you many, many examples. The same goes for maize. Maize, Ghana has a potential of 5-6 million metric tons. Until we came, Ghana had never been able to do 2 million metric tons, of which 1.5 million was left in the producing areas for local consumption, and about 500,000 came on the market. Last year, we were able to increase maize output by nearly 1/3 to 3 million metric tons, which means that we have this surplus, part of which we are selling outside Ghana to neighboring countries as far as northern Nigeria, Burkina Faso, and the others. But that is not enough. We need to be able to finance the local milling, maize milling industry through the banks supported by the central bank with some guarantees and so on. So this, I'm just trying to demonstrate to you that in Ghana, we know where the SMEs are, and we are working very closely with them. I've formed all kinds of committees in my office so that the industry, the trade and the industry come together to see how best we can support them. So these are the challenges, and it shows you that the magnitude of the opportunity for investment, which has been brought about because of the basic planting for food and jobs policy that the government has pursued. I think I'll end here. My 5 minutes are up, and I'll really sit back and enjoy the rest of the discussion. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Honourable Minister, thank you so much for those words and also for your continued championship and your inspiration. I'm handing it back over to my colleague Valentine, who's going to introduce the rest of the program. Valentine.
Thank you so much, Honourable Minister and colleagues who've made presentations earlier. We are progressing well, and now we really want to go to the heart of what the deal room is all about. And I don't want to steal the show from our board member, Frank, who has lots of experience in the private sector, having worked for Unilever in many positions and in many countries. And Frank also is an executive board member at Bula, the Swiss engineering group. So Frank, we would like to invite you to moderate the next exciting part of this launch of the deal room to engage investors and SMEs. Welcome.
Thank you, everybody. I hope you hear me well. The part of my experience that actually gives me most pleasure is that I have been from the early days involved in SACCOP, the Southern agricultural growth corridor of Tanzania, and that was together with Jennifer many, many years ago. And so many of the things that I now see happening all originated actually from that multi-party commitment to do something bigger in agriculture in Africa. So that's why Jennifer always knows where to find her moderator if she needs one. So it's a pleasure to do that. I'm here, it's a double pleasure because I am going to moderate a very distinguished panel. There is, and each of them will have an opportunity to introduce them in a little bit more detail, but as you've seen in the program, there's Donald Brown, Associate Vice President, International Fund for Agricultural Development. There is Rebecca Mincy, who is Investment Director for the Acumen Investment Partners. Francis Obiri-Kurang, who's AgroCenta CEO and co-founder, and Josephine Oktot, Victoria Seeds founder and director. Normally, I would say women's first, but as this is challenging in itself already, virtual panels like this, I suggest we go into the sequence of the program. The idea is that each of the panelists will 3 to 5 minutes introduce themselves and their organization, and then talk a little bit from their practical on-the-ground perspective. Have they seen any significant changes or innovations in investment strategies and the investment around them? And of course, there is this context of COVID. Is there anything specific that they could share with us about investments and partnership? And then in general, give us a feeling of their sentiment towards the future around agriculture in Africa. So I must say also to everybody on this call, there's an opportunity for asking questions. You post your questions in the chat box. I have no visibility on these questions, so I will be relying on Jennifer for picking out the best ones and the most relevant ones, and then throwing them at the panel, time permitting, after the introduction. So with that, I would like to hand over to Donald for the first introduction. Donald, over to you.
Thanks, Frank. I hope you can all hear me all right. And good day to everyone, Honourable Ministers, Excellencies, all protocols observed. What Frank didn't tell you is he told us we also had 5 minutes to try and answer 3 questions and all the other things he said. So I'll be pretty brief and wait to come back for further questions. So just firstly, for those of you that do not know IFAD, the International Fund for Agricultural Development, it's I call it a hybrid between a UN specialized agency and an IFI. But our mandate is to focus on alleviating rural poverty and hunger through inclusive rural transformation. So basically that means jobs, incomes, and food security for the poorest. So as of January 2020, we have an overall investment portfolio in countries of, and it's a global institution, of about 20 billion. But we also have leveraged another nearly 30 billion through co-financing. And we have seen, obviously, like others, that COVID has had a real impact on our target group, basically the rural poorest. So we've spent quite a lot of time in the last few months repurposing some of our existing projects, helping with some of the policy responses, and also mobilizing additional resources, both through a pro-poor stimulus facility, but also through some work with the private sector. Now, maybe just moving on to our links with the private sector, and we're kind of the new kids on the block. We're learning by doing, and we have some excellent partnerships, including with people like AGRA. Now, while we've spent about 40 years working with the private sector, it has been mainly indirectly through our programs with government, our program of loans and grants, through what we call a 4Ps approach, which is a public-private producer partnerships. So we specifically tend to try and focus on farmer groups, cooperatives that represent poor rural people and build their capacity to engage with the private sector directly. However, recently, we changed our articles of agreement for the foundation of IFAD to allow us to work directly with the private sector and invest with the private sector. So going from working with to working to, and a number of issues in this context. And as I say, it's a bit of a fast-moving feat for IFAD. We have a new private sector engagement strategy as of September last year. By the way, that's not my cockerel. We also have a new framework for engaging with the private sector, which sets out eligibility for IFAD funds, the financial instruments that we can use, and also our approach to risk management and safeguards. And that has all led to two things. We have a new private sector fund of 25 million, particularly to look at some of the consequences of COVID, which we're using for direct investments. We have 2 or 3 ways of doing that. We can do it through loans and risk sharing, or we can do it through, direct investments. But probably the first thing we've learned, just even in the first few months since COVID's hit us, is we need to be more flexible in our approach. We had a number of potential deals coming through already which have been hit by COVID, and we've had to reassess and work out again how we do some of that. We're still generating more in the pipeline there, but we're prioritizing projects which are complementary to our wider program of loans and grants. So as I say, particularly focusing on the hidden middle, particularly focusing on where there is lack of access to finance for agricultural SMEs due to the higher risk, or where there are problems with MFIs in portfolio performance and we can help with investments, or where there are liquidity problems. And again, particularly this is a problem with COVID, and how we can help some of these good businesses that have been affected by COVID and liquidity. So that's more or less where we are at the moment. Early days for us. We have all the building blocks in place. We should have been further forward, but COVID hit us quite hard. But we do have a number of potential investments. And then if I just may finish by saying the other aspect, which I've not really talked about today, because we've talked about it at previous ARGFs, is the launch of the ABC fund with the European Union, with AGRA, and with the government of Luxembourg, which we established towards the end of 2018, early 2019. And it's an impact investment fund, which has 2 pillars: direct investments in the form of working capital, and indirect investments in the form of term loans of up to 4 million euros or equivalent to financial institutions. That fund, since we last met, is certainly fully operational. The investment committees approved 10 investment projects. In fact, 2 of them have started dispersing in Côte d'Ivoire, and we have a significant pipeline. So I'll stop there, Frank, and I'll look forward to questions.
Thank you, Donald. That sounds very upbeat. Is that correct? So in terms of the outlook, that sounds positive, and no reason for pessimism.
I think we can all be pessimistic and doom and gloom, but what we've found after some initial hits from COVID, the demand is probably greater than ever, but we've had to adapt a little bit in that context. So some of the initial investments slipped away, but other ones have filled in. I think probably we've got to take a bit more of a risk approach given the impact of COVID, but certainly there's some very good investments out there still. So yes, we're pretty upbeat.
Thank you, Donald. Over to Rebecca, who can give us probably an equally very internal sense of how sentiments have shifted. As I said earlier, Rebecca, Investment Director with Acumen Partners. Rebecca, over to you.
Great. Just a thumbs up if you can hear me to the rest of my panelists. Okay, great. Thank you. I'm using my phone and my computer, so apologies for any technical glitches in advance. Thank you for having me. It's really a pleasure to be a part of such an esteemed group of colleagues. Again, my name is Rebecca, and I am the investment director for Acumen Capital Partners. Many of you know Acumen as one of the leaders in the impact investing space. We are approaching our 20th anniversary, which is really exciting. We've learned a lot, we've done a lot, and we still have a lot more to do. Essentially, the purpose of Acumen is to change the way the world tackles poverty. And we do that through 3 different pillars. We do that through investing in companies, leaders, and ideas. And I'm on the companies side of those 3 pillars. I sit in Nairobi, and I'm the investment director, and my responsibility is to build and manage a portfolio of companies that help smallholder farmers adapt to climate change. I think this conversation is particularly important now. Everyone is thinking about COVID and some of the similarities around value chain resilience are very appropriate for climate change. I think before I kind of launch into a little bit about the initiative, I wanted to just give a caveat to those listening who are really intrigued to hear what investors say. What I'm about to outline is a very specific kind of approach to investing. And I think for anyone, any SME looking for external financing, one of the things you'll want to be very clear about is the investment thesis, the investment approach, the ticket size, et cetera, of the investor that you're talking to. Each investor has a very unique, very nuanced approach. And so it's important to understand that before you move forward. So I thought I would just take the opportunity to tell you a little bit about our investment approach for Acumen Capital Partners and for our investments in climate resilient companies. So for starters, we invest in Kenya, Uganda, Rwanda, Ethiopia, Ghana, and Nigeria. We are equity investors. We also invest what we call quasi-equity. Regrettably, we are not debt investors. There are more capable financial institutions that are better at managing debt than we are. The types of companies that we invest in, we look for what we call platform businesses. And platform businesses are companies that provide a bundle set of solutions to smallholder farmers. So instead of just being a one-stop shop for inputs, we look for companies that may be providing inputs and financing and farmer training and guaranteed market offtake. So those are just some of the types of companies that we look at. Specifically, we like ag tech companies, we like ag finance companies, and we also like pure kind of value chain plays or aggregators is what we call them. Our typical ticket size is between $1 and $3 million. So that is just, again, a range. Nothing is absolute, but that's our sweet spot. So just know that that's where we play. What are we looking for when we make investments? We're looking for really strong management teams that have a track record for executing in these markets. These are not easy places to work in, and they are nuanced, and we want entrepreneurs who have that demonstrated set of experience. The other thing we're looking for is innovation. And innovation doesn't necessarily mean technology. Usually technology is an enabler, but technology can easily be overtaken. Today's predictive algorithm becomes an off-the-shelf, out-of-the-box solution that someone can download onto their laptop tomorrow. So tech innovation is not enough of a hedge for any business today. But some of the things that we do like and we do consider innovative are innovations around supply chain management, innovations around logistics, innovations around streamlining certain very fragmented value chains. So we do look for innovation, and we do look for innovation that has a competitive advantage over a longer period of time. One thing that we also look for, and I think it's important that SMEs understand this, is that we're looking for scale. We're looking for companies that are thinking about a multi-country or regional approach to growing the business. There are a lot of great companies that are focused exclusively on local markets, and that's fine. And I'll speak a little bit more about why those types of companies are more interesting in a post-COVID environment. But as an early stage investor, so we typically come in at what's called a Series A, part of a series of fundraisers. So we typically come in Series A. We're looking for companies who would like to go beyond Kenya or go beyond Nigeria or go beyond Ghana. We believe that there is tremendous opportunity. We believe there's a risk diversification in making regional plays, but I just wanted to underscore the importance of scale as part of the story that we are looking for. And then finally, the last two parts are around financial viability. We want to invest in companies that are profitable or have a clear path to profitability, along with that story of scale.
Rebecca, I lost you. I don't know for the others. Did we lose Rebecca? Ah, Rebecca's back. I lost you for a minute.
Okay. Can you tell me, Frank, where I dropped off?
I scale 30 seconds ago when you were going beyond your just point on scale.
Sure. Sorry. So scale is incredibly important. We're looking for multi-regional plays, multi-country plays. The diversification is incredibly important. And then I think the last thing that I will add is around financial sustainability. That is also very important to us. As you grow, as you scale, that is part and parcel of it. Fantastic. And I think finally, I will just add that climate resilience is also very important to us, and focusing on smallholder farmers as part of that lens through which climate resilience is built over time.
Yeah, thank you, Rebecca. Rebecca, if there's one tip or one thing you would like to say to the team managing the deal room, what would it be, you as an investor?
I would say that I think the most important thing that we look for that really gets our attention is the scale story and the management team. Those are two areas that, if as you think about creating the deal room, really increasing the capacity or increasing the number of participants who have both of those skill sets would be most important.
Thank you. Very clear. Thank you, Rebecca. With that, I would like to hand over to Francis, as I said, CEO and co-founder of AgroCenter. Francis.
Yes, hello, can everybody hear me? My name is Francis Obrikrai. I am the CEO and co-founder of AgroCenter. So I'll give you a little background of AgroCenter, where we started from, where we are now, and what we are doing within the agricultural value chain in Ghana. So AgroCenter started off in 2016 as an agtech platform, so an agricultural technology company that was focusing on delivering services to smallholder farmers. You find out that more than 80% of smallholder farmers in Africa do subsistence, so mainly between 1 to 2 acres of 1 to 4 acres of cultivation. But then there was a bigger challenge for smallholder farmers accessing two critical services. One, accessing a structured market to be able to trade fairly. So farmers in the rural areas were at the mercy of these middlemen who will buy commodities at very cheap prices from farmers, sometimes 40% below what the market price even offers. So farmers year in, year out were losing a lot of potential income. It's even estimated that farmers lose annually close to about $280 million of potential income through exploitative trade to middlemen. That was a bigger challenge. On the other hand, also farmers could not access a lot of financial services. Farmers could not access loans. Farmers could not access input financing because there was no financial identity on smallholder farmers. A lot of the informal sector is cash based. So farmer goes to the bank and says, I need, let's say, about $400 to be able to buy agricultural inputs. What the bank is going to request for is some form of financial identity. So they're going to ask him, do you have any form of financial trail? Do you have any form of bank savings? The farmer says no, which means the farmer cannot access this service. So accessing financial service was a bigger challenge for smaller farmers. So based on these two key problems, what we did at Agro Center was to come up with two platforms, two technologies that would solve this problem. So we look at focusing on solving access to markets and then access to financial service for farmers. So now farmers can have access to a structured market where the demand originates from small, medium, and large organizations who need raw material for production. So I'm talking about companies in the breweries, companies in the FMCGs, companies in the exporting industry who have the mandate to source locally for production. So farmers are now able to sell to these big institutions aggregated demand at fair market prices. Also now farmers are able to access financial services such as microloans from participating financial institutions. Farmers can access pensions services. Farmers can access even crop insurance on the platform. Looking at the outlook, so on the impact, what we do at Agro Center is as part of it, we're a for-profit company. As part of what we do is also to track the impact of what we do in the life of smallholder farmers. What we look at is mainly we track three impact based on SDGs. We look at one, the zero poverty, where we look at building the financial livelihood of smallholder farmers. We look at zero hunger, where we look at this, we ensure that there's equal food distribution that is across the country to ensure that the farm to fork approach is very successful. Then we look at also gender equality, where we look at equal participation of women in agriculture. If you look at the land tenure system in Ghana and some West African countries, women do not own agricultural lands, the land belongs to the men. So there's an active drive from Agro Center to be able to involve women in active agriculture by enabling them to have access to this land to participate in agriculture. We are almost about a 3.5-year-old company. We look at from the impacts of the COVID, it's been on the business. If you look at what for the first half of the year, it's been quite disastrous. Looking at what the farmers access, so the farmers were very apprehensive of even accessing some of these inputs because a lot of the demand were even cut down. If you look at what these big institutions, so if you look at companies that usually buy from the farmer networks, they are companies in the brewery sector. These companies have to cut down production because nobody was going to the bars anymore. There was lockdown. Nobody was buying alcoholic beverages. So the demand on smallholder farmers was downsized to even about 40–50%. Accessing even agricultural input was quite a challenge, but thankfully we are getting over that. Most of the farmers, based on some of the government interventions the minister mentioned, planting for food and jobs, where the farmers are getting access to some of these inputs to overcome most of these challenges. So the outlook for this year is next year, we look with optimism, with careful optimism, if I have to say that, progressing gradually to the point where we ensure that there's food security and food sustainability. So that's what I have to say about Agro Center and what the outlook is for the next 1 to 2 years.
Thank you, Francis. Clearly, your platform is catering to a need. What is the biggest barrier for accelerating growth for a platform then like yours?
So the biggest barrier is two ways. One, we look at the investment. A platform like this needs a lot of capital requirements to be able to move. Because if you look at the farmer network, most farmers want cash upfront for even the goods they sell. If you look at the institutions, these institutions are willing to pay between a 30 to 45-day period. So there's a lot of liquidity issues that comes in for this platform to scale. Secondly, also we look at technology. If you look at the rural areas, technology is not as diverse as the urban areas. Most of the farmers cannot access simple technologies. Farmers do not even own smartphones. The literacy level of smallholder farmers is very low. So these are two major challenges that present us with a lot of growth and then scale.
Thank you, Francis. I would like to hand over to Josephine, who is founder and director of Victoria Seeds. Josephine, over to you. We don't hear you.
Yes, hi. Do you hear me, Frank?
Yes, we hear you loud and clear. Thank you, Joseph.
Yeah, okay. Good afternoon, Your Excellencies, distinguished panelists and participants in the deal room. My name is Josephine Okot. I am going to speak briefly about Victoria Seeds Limited and then share my, I would say, on the ground experiences and what opportunities have emerged post-COVID. So Victoria Seeds is actually an SME in Uganda. It's founded in 2004. We're a seed company and we cater to smallholder farmers largely. We provide cereal, legume, and vegetable crops. And our primary goal, of course, is to improve the yield of the farmers and by extension also their livelihood. What have I seen in the past 15 years? What has changed? Actually, in the business, I've seen climate change impacting on the farmers very, very seriously in terms of the weather patterns changing, and many times the rain doesn't stop when it should stop, or it doesn't start when it should start. Then with that, we have had a lot of invasive pests and new diseases that emerge. So that's a challenge. And as a business, what we would do is try to collaborate with research and try to get products that can help farmers mitigate the impact of climate change. So as Victoria Seeds, we focus a lot on drought-tolerant varieties. So we don't just tell a farmer that grow a certified maize seed, but rather grow a drought-tolerant maize variety. And I think there are many partners that I should mention, perhaps CIMIT and then AATF with the water efficient maize for Africa. So they made it easier for us to access technology. And I think that is exciting. But before I move further, I would also really want to congratulate Dr. Kalibata for particularly promoting women-owned businesses. Many times we are on the back seat, although over 75% of the labor force in agriculture is provided by women, but when it goes further up the value chain, you don't find them driving the businesses. So I really, really want to commend you, applaud you, Dr. Kalibata, and say, please keep up. Now, with, of course, with COVID then, what are the new opportunities? As a business, how we manage COVID, I'm grateful for to our government in that the agri-input sector was considered an essential service, just like doctors. So we were free to move with our seeds to deliver. But the challenge is because of the lockdown, people who have to walk from far to open their agri-input shops, they remained closed. But actually, we were still able to supply and trade. But of course, there was some kind of a decline, but not very massive. But the opportunity that has emerged is that policy makers or government has realized that dependence on the global supply chain is no longer a viable option, not just for Uganda, but most of Africa. Whatever we can produce and add value to must be done locally, not just from sanitizers, but even when we speak of agriculture mechanization, like Dr. Kalibata mentioned earlier. So these are the opportunities that I see can emerge post-COVID, that the policy space will be much more favorable. The policy space will focus more on helping the local or domestic entrepreneurs to succeed. And specific to the seed sector, I know over the years, the research has largely focused on what works for the farmer. How can we improve the farmer's yield? How can we ensure that they can cope with drought? But there has been very little research that moves and addresses value addition or agro-processors. What is their need? If you are producing poultry, if you are producing poultry feed, if you are producing fish feed, what is the protein content in the soya? How can we make the maize with a better quality protein? How can we fortify it with vitamin A to make it more nutrition for the companies that produce the baby foods. So I think it's going to drive research to focus more on value addition. And over the years, the challenge I've faced as a business is you have a very good year, you sell large volumes of seed, then the next season, because there were good rains, there's a bumper harvest, then you have a price collapse, like even 90% drop in price of maize. Then farmers no longer want to grow that crop, and you are stuck with a lot of maize stock the next season. So I think that has been the challenge, because there is no well-developed value chain. And I think that moves me to the comments that I really liked. I wonder, it came from Anis. Yes, I think access and cost of finance. Honestly, as a SME, I borrow, let's say, at 20%. And the products that the commercial banks provide are very, very limited. They are not structured to support agriculture. With that high cost of finance at 20%, it's very difficult with the 3-year maximum limit that they give you. It's not possible to grow one's business. And sometimes I feel very sad, because I see competitors who come from China, they borrow at 3% or 1% or less, and there are competitors who come perhaps from multinationals from Europe, from the US, and we are competing in the same space. I'm struggling with a 20% interest, 22% interest, and they borrow at 1% or less. So I think it becomes very challenging to thrive in that environment. And I believe that with COVID-19 and government realizing that global supply chains are not an option, commercial banks is not the mechanism for providing even working capital for us, because as seed, they give us 120 days. And contract finance, so if they give you a long time, it is 6 months. But seriously, my crop grows in 6 months. And if you are just bulking the parental lines, you need 3 seasons, 1.5 years, but no single commercial bank can provide that product. So the deal room is the greatest opportunity. I congratulate Dr. Kalibata again that really brings alternative financing outside commercial banks, because agribusiness, agriculture, we should never walk to the commercial banks. And the sadness with commercial banks, I'll dwell a little bit, is they are bankers, but what we need inside the bank are maybe either agricultural economists or extension experts who understand that, you see, when a crop is grown, a maize crop may be attacked by fall armyworm, but if there's insurance, the risk is 0. So let's give the funding. We do not have bankers who understand agriculture. They are just bankers. And we have very smart extension and agriculture economists who are in the field, and they are not able to so there is that kind of mismatch. So I think the deal room is a major plus, and I would encourage that very many of the SMEs should be exposed. From my experience, they don't have the information. I do not know how AGRA can perhaps popularize it better. It is the way to go. And of course, the other innovation that has come up out of the COVID-19 lockdown is digitization of extension. I know we used to sing about it following the last AGRF, but there was little appreciation that we should really digitize. Now with COVID, everybody has understood that it's important that extension cannot still we cannot still look for that one agriculture officer in a sub-county to provide all the information. We need to digitize. Then moving forward, what are my outlooks for 2020, 2021? I think it's very encouraging and positive in the context that there will be better policy framework for agriculture investment, particularly financing. I would encourage investment in crop insurance if AGRA in the deal room could engage. Because, for example, Uganda, the government pumps in like 5 billion shillings annually to provide for crop insurance. Like 20 to 80%. The farmer pays 20, government pays 80%. But you'll find that the commercial banks do not even bother to sit with government and put that insurance in their products to make either the money less risky or to make the products cheaper, the cost of finance come down. So I would encourage if you get more crop insurance to help the farmers manage climate change. And the other one is business development services. I cannot emphasize that more, because business development services is something that is businesses need to grow and to succeed. Most times an investor, I'm sure like Rebecca, would be happier if a company has a very good business development service support. And normally as SMEs, we are startup. When I make a mistake, I'm treated like Coca-Cola, which is 120 years old. They expect me to be as informed or as experienced as Coca-Cola. That is very unfair. And you know, I'll share my experience.
Josephine,
when I started. Yeah.
Josephine,
yeah.
I do apologize. Josephine,
yes,
I do apologize for the time.
Okay.
Your passion is absolutely powerful. It's unbelievable.
Okay, I end there.
It is so impressive to hear your passion. But I do have a small question. You are so clear on the challenges. I don't think I've ever heard it so clearly and so passionately. Is it getting better?
In terms
if you talk about access to finance, etc., very short answer. Do you see it getting better? Access to finance, for example.
Access
short
to
answer,
finance
please.
is better, yes, but cost is horrendous.
Good.
So it's a zero-sum game.
It's really important. No, I feel you on that financing cost. It's not people talk about access to finance in an absolute sense, but the cost of capital is horrendous if you are a farmer. So you made that point very clearly. I think, Jennifer, we are a bit over time, but I don't know whether you want to throw a question to one of our panelists.
Well, what I would like to suggest, right, because we really had a lot of very rich inputs from our panel, that we actually shift to the rest of the program, because many of the questions that also came through were already addressed by several of the panelists. For example, what is it that you're doing with women SMEs, climate change, etc. So I think it's really time to thank our panelists and yourself for these enriching discussions, and let's just promise that we will continue this in the Agribusiness Skill Room during the AGRF from the 8th till 11th of September, which will also be virtually.
Thank you very much. I would like to thank the panelists as well for your passion and your contribution. Thank you. Over to you, Jennifer.
Thank you so much. And I would like to hand it over to our Vice President, Vanessa Adams, who will be working with the other speakers towards the end of this session. Vanessa, please go ahead.
Thank you so much. This has just been fascinating and exciting. So much great information. And here we're only doing the launch, and yet we have actually enough, I think, for Tom Reardon to publish a whole new paper for us before AGRF even starts. So Tom, we're waiting for more. We do expect that the team at KPMG will finish and publish their latest report. And I know Anis has to leave for another meeting. So thank you for your presentation, Anis. And I'm really looking forward to the report coming online in the next month. And I also really appreciate Dr. Kalibata sticking with us. I know that this topic is so important to all the work also leading up to the Food System Summit, and as well as the work we're doing across Africa. So with that, I would love to welcome Bonnie Glick, who is the Deputy Administrator for the U.S. Agency for International Development. And I love that Bonnie's Wikipedia page tells us about all the many languages she speaks. So if you're wondering if she's speaking in English today, she can go back and forth between several languages to remind us how global the deal room really is. And she's also been in private sector, not only with the US government. And so I hope that she'll remind us of her passion for the private sector as well in her remarks. But we're so happy and pleased that you can join us today. Please, over to you.
Vanessa, thank you so much. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Great. We're in this new era of virtual conversations, but I think it can be quite effective, and the reach in many ways can be that much greater. So I'm delighted to be here. Thank you so much for having me here as part of this great discussion on such a critical issue. I want to thank Dr. Agnes Kalibata for her leadership of the Alliance for a Green Revolution in Africa. USAID, the U.S. Agency for International Development, is so proud to have worked with her and with the Alliance to establish the Agribusiness Deal Room. In 2019, the Deal Room helped originate over $200 million in investment commitments for African businesses. We're excited to see even more deals done in 2020 and together to drive agricultural growth in Africa. Vanessa mentioned that I had spent time in the private sector, but what many people don't know is that I'm also a smallholder farmer myself. So I understand the challenges of being part of the agriculture sector and the roles that farmers and agribusiness play in the economy, whether in local communities or around the world. These are definitely challenging times for the agriculture sector. COVID-19 is not only a global health crisis, it's also undermining food security and nutrition around the world. Travel restrictions, marketplace closures, and stay-at-home orders are necessary to stop the spread of the virus, but they also disrupt agriculture and food systems. Due to COVID-19, Africa's agricultural productivity is expected to contract between 3 to 7%. Agriculture, we all know, is the primary driver of development and growth, so the decline in productivity is going to have broad and deep impacts, which is why the private sector is needed now more than ever. It was terrific to hear a conversation around the digitization of agriculture and agribusiness. Private enterprise like this is the most powerful engine ever devised for lifting people out of poverty, strengthening communities, and accelerating countries on their journeys to self-reliance. USAID's approach to economic growth is to deepen engagement with the private sector and to embrace market-based approaches to achieve development outcomes. For example, in Kenya, USAID is investing grant funding into a business-to-business mobile platform to connect rural smallholder farmers to informal urban markets. I met one of these farmers when I visited a large livestock market in northern Kenya last year in Isiolo County. Veronica, who had run a small agribusiness for 20 years, struggled to expand her business due to challenges she faced in a male-dominated industry. Through Feed the Future, the US government's flagship Global Hunger and Food Security Initiative, USAID is helping women like Veronica. USAID helped Veronica receive a $300 loan to expand her business, and she was able to pay it back after only 5 months. She also used her profits to buy a car to deliver more goods to market and to boost her own income. With this income, Veronica is sending her 4 children to school and feeding them nutritious food. Here's what she said: "I love my business. With my job, I've brought up my children. All of this from a micro loan of only $300. Investing in farmers like Veronica is what initiatives like the Agribusiness Deal Room is all about. Last year, 40% of the businesses helped were run by women. We know that the agriculture sector is uniquely placed to advance women's economic empowerment across Africa. The deal room demonstrates that the most enduring and sustainable investment is the kind where everyone can benefit and where prosperity is shared and seen widely. Each deal that you create, each new venture, each new idea that is tested represents another step forward. Even when things don't work out as you plan, there's a lesson that can be applied in the future. The greatest business leaders have also almost universally suffered a few missteps along the way. This is how we learn, and it's also how we grow. The great American inventor, Thomas Alva Edison, was once asked how many designs he had for the light bulb that failed. He said, "I haven't failed. I've just found 10,000 ways that won't work." This is the type of innovation that we want to foster. We know that creative solutions to development challenges are out there. They're represented by the many businesses in the deal room. Small and medium enterprises are the lifeblood of African economies. They account for 90% of businesses and 70% of jobs on the continent. So we at USAID will continue to support the private sector and sustain economic growth, prosperity, and self-reliance in the agriculture sector, as well as across economic sectors in Africa. I thank you all so much for everything that you're doing to promote prosperity in Africa at a time that is so uncertain across global economies. So Vanessa, with that, I'll turn it back over to you, and thank you so very much.
Thank you, Bonnie, for such a heartfelt story and so many contributions that USAID is making across the continent. And there's really, along with USAID as a co-chair, IFAD, and Donald has disappeared, but he's still online. IFAD is also co-chairing the Agribusiness Deal Room with AGRA. And for those of you who haven't seen this yet, because we're only launching today, there are actually 27 different partners contributing technically and administratively and financially to the deal room. So hopefully you can see all of the logos on here. Very importantly, we're very proud to have thought leadership contribution and support from, of course, GAIN and TBI, along with WEF. We have a significant contribution of all the AGRF partners, but some of them actually contribute staff time and even mobilize SMEs. And really the value and the beauty of the deal room for all of you who have been sticking with us, 435 participants still online, even though we're over time, which is fantastic. So we're really Sorry, I was beautifully muted. Right in the middle of the importance of introducing our closing and official final launch. We've had such a fantastic lineup of speakers from the Minister of Food and Agriculture of Ghana, and of course with IFAD, and the very inspirational story, Josephine, who's sticking with us, reminding us of the digital ag importance of reaching so far in the times of COVID and the challenges that we're reaching. And our host country has been really the first country to be a virtual host of AGRF and of the AGRF deal room. So who knew that Rwanda was going global as a virtual AGRF host? That's just a phenomenal new approach and mindset. And of course, there couldn't be anybody better than Madame Claire Akamanzi, the CEO of the Rwanda Development Board. And we're so appreciative that you were able to join us in spite of your very, very busy schedule. And thankfully, we're a little late, so you were able to jump in, and please let us hear your remarks and your launch as we go forward into the full AGRF deal room platform. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Vanessa, and I'd like to recognize the Honorable Minister of Food and Agriculture of Ghana, Honorable Dr. Kalibatam and the Board of AGRAM, distinguished speakers and guests this afternoon, greetings from Kigali. I'm indeed very, very pleased to join you this afternoon, and thank you, Vanessa, for accommodating me, and I was very pleased to be able to make it this afternoon. I also want to thank the AGRAM Secretariat for choosing Rwanda as the host of the deal room, but also we're very pleased to be the host of AGRF as a country, and we're looking forward to making the first virtual AGRF a reality and also a success. Now, when we look at Rwanda's economy during and post-COVID, we are a country that had been growing at a very strong rate over the last few years at an average of 8%. And in fact, for Rwanda in 2019 was one of our highest performing years. We grew at 9.5% of GDP in 2019. And so, like many countries, the setback that COVID-19 will impact our economy is real. The African Development Bank has just released its projections. And even though Rwanda has been named by the AFDB as one of the more resilient countries, expected to grow at 4.2%, we know that it's really going to take a lot of hard work to even realize the projection that AFDB has at 4.2% GDP in 2020. But Rwanda has been working very hard to build its resilience as an economy, but also to build its self-reliance. We have worked very hard over the last years to implement and develop very strong structural policies that have supported not just agricultural growth, productivity, but also the private sector to play an important role for our economy. We have worked very hard with specific policies that have boosted domestic production and domestic productivity over the years. And these are partly the reasons that we are seeing some resilience despite COVID-19. We've worked very hard to build a very conducive business environment. As you know, Rwanda is ranked the second easiest place to do business by the World Bank after Mauritius on the African continent. And we continue to work hard to also build this resilience even with the impact of COVID-19. And of course, as many have seen, the role of e-commerce has been extremely important in building this resilience for Rwanda. Rwanda has had so many, more than 2 dozens of e-commerce companies, especially in food distribution, in linking markets and consumers within the country. But we've also participated in the EWTP platform of Alibaba, where today Rwanda sells especially agricultural produce, coffee and chilies, most importantly. And we know that as we build this resilience even further, developing e-commerce is going to be extremely important for us as a country. Now, as we look at the outlook beyond COVID-19 later this year, the second half of this year, and also next year, the government of Rwanda has been working very hard, like many countries, to see how we can contain the impact and try to mitigate the impact of COVID-19. We have done the following, if I could quickly go through them. Number one, we've set up an economic resilience fund of $100 million, and this is purely to support companies in the private sector that have been affected by COVID-19. And that's mostly in the hospitality sector, in the manufacturing sector, and all the other sectors that have been affected, whether it's agricultural produce for exports or reduced productivity and production because of COVID-19. This $100 million fund is in place to do the following. One, to access working capital going forward, but also to allow companies to restructure their loans and for them to become able to pay and sustain their loans going forward. In addition to the fund, the government of Rwanda has also continued to support through subsidies the agricultural sector, especially in the export business. We have set up a discounted rate and we subsidize all exporters of agricultural produce, especially flowers and horticulture, to a tune of 0.4 cents per kilogram. And this again is to bring the cost of doing business down and to be able to encourage businesses to continue exporting. In fact, during the COVID-19 lockdown, the government of Rwanda continued to charter planes, especially our national carrier, Rwandair, to export and support farmers to sustain the markets that they have been able to acquire before COVID-19. We will continue to also invest in the infrastructure for logistics, whether it's pack rooms, cold rooms, as well as infield irrigation. Again, we know that the role of government continues to be very much needed as we build more resilience to go beyond the COVID-19 period. We have our flagship project, the Gabiro Agro Farm, that we will be very much discussing in the context of AGRF, where we are irrigating up to 5,000 hectares of land and supporting private sector to acquire land for different produce within the country. And so as we launch the deal room today, the government of Rwanda continues to work with all the partners as well as Agro Secretariat in further preparing the deal room, but also identifying very specific projects, very specific engagements that we can continue to deal with the private sector. We will sensitize the local SMEs especially to continue their role, and also support in the development of technical documents as well as follow-up as needed beyond AGRF. And so with this, the government of Rwanda is very, very pleased to be hosting this deal room today and to be hosting the AGRF this year. We will launch the Agribusiness deal room together with all the partners. And with these remarks, allow me, ladies and gentlemen, to declare the Agribusiness deal room launched. And I look forward to a very fruitful event, and especially for deals to be concluded. Thank you.
Thank you, thank you. And this is, I hope you hear echoes of 400 people still clapping online. We really are very, very excited and pleased with all the efforts and initiatives which Rwanda is leading the way with. And of course, we've heard from Ghana, we've heard from Uganda today, and Tom Reardon reminded us of some examples in Nigeria as well as Ethiopia. And I'm very excited as well that AGRF this year is expecting to be much bigger than usual. Because it's fully virtual. And I think with that, Dr. Kalibata, I would leave the word of thanks to you. If you can find the mute.
Thank you. No, thank you for unmuting me. I was struggling to get that mute button. No, thank you, Claire. We are really, really proud to be associated with the work you're doing in Rwanda. And we are very proud also to be bringing back the Agribusiness deal room. I know it was launched in 2018. So it's been growing. If you look at the type of resources that people are talking about, it's definitely grown big time. And we are very excited to continue growing this opportunity. Thank you, Bonnie. It's very good to see you here. We are very excited to have your support, continue having your support and the support of USAID behind the work that we do. And we appreciate all our partners and the work they are doing. Josephine, the work that you're doing, Joseph, the work that you're doing, and all the partners that I can't see. I see this has over 400, close 500 people called in. So I know all our partners have called in, and I'm really grateful for the support that we get from all of you. I think that what is clear for all of us is our SMEs are so critical to the agriculture sector. They, like Tom said, they handle over 80% of the food that we are eating. They handle significant volumes of food and significant volumes of money. We cannot afford to see them reverse in the way they've been working because of resources. And we applaud the government of Rwanda for putting forward resources in recognition of this fact. And we encourage more of our countries and more of the partners that we have to really recognize that going back on SMEs is going back on, 10 decades of years of working on developing the agriculture sector. So I really want to encourage you to do more. I want to encourage you to partner with all these SMEs more. And I want to encourage you to grow these businesses in African agriculture. The opportunities are huge. And we are here to support you. The governments are here to support you. Our job is to make sure that these things actually do work. So thank you again to all of you. Thank you to the support that we get from all the partners we work with. And we look forward to seeing you at the AGRF in reality in September, when we do have we have 4 days of meetings of AGRF. The D room is one of them. All of them, we promise you, are going to be extremely exciting. You want to be part of them. And again, thank you to the government of Rwanda for accepting to host us. They had no obligation to do this year, but they accepted to come with us on this virtual summit. They didn't sign up for a virtual summit. They signed up for for a physical summit, but we are really proud that you were willing to take on the challenge and come with us along the journey that COVID has presented. So thank you again, and thank you for your support. And goodbye to all of you. We'll see you back in September. Bye. Thank you.
Those of you who are closing out can reach us at